I'm hoping, we talked about what's as the future, and that was going to be one of the questions. I am hoping that our partners, I don't want to use the word learn because that's really condescending, but I hope that we just don't go back to this whole push new car piece of wholesale, and there's a middle ground to be had. And yes, agency, we could talk for hours about it and how it looks, and maybe that's the birth of it. But there's somewhere in the middle that we can really operate in a efficient, effective way, making good margins, and as you said earlier, look after the customer with the right kind of amount of time.
And welcome to the AM News Show. Joining us today, we have Umesh Samani, who's the owner of Specialist Cars, a independent used car dealership in Stoke, and he's also a co-founder of the Independent Motor Dealer Association. And we're also joined by Ben Archer, who is the managing director of Arbury Motor Group.
Thanks, Umesh, for joining us again, and thanks, Ben. Good to see you. Great to have you both in the studio, and on a morning where we sort of heard what we all knew, in that inflation's going through the roof. We're at 9% as of today. I'm dating the podcast, obviously, but it's a worthwhile conversation. I just wonder, I'll come to you first, Ben, really, but in terms of, your hope for the year, there's all sorts of challenges ahead, but this cost of living crisis, is that something that you are seeing reflected in footfall or demand, or are we still in a situation where, crikey, the lead times are so long that we're sitting pretty for a good long while yet?
I heard it on the news this morning, and without being sort of tongue-in-cheek, I wish I'd start talking about COVID again, if I'm brutally honest. Unfortunately, I think with the media, the more and more you talk about it, the more and more it gets into our consumers' heads.
I'm sorry for kicking off with that.
Oh, no. We've definitely seen a change in the last couple of months since the end of quarter one, from an inquiry and footfall. We're converting at the same rate, particularly in the sales arena. But yeah, with the actual quantity of inquiries, it's definitely going to have an impact. If you're a consumer, it's a bill at home, or it's a service bill, or a car. I think I'm probably going to pay the bill at home. So I think it's going to be tough, to use a word that I think we've all used. However, saying that, the used car market, from a demand and supply and sort of the kickback from the new car market, that still seems to be very buoyant from a margin point of view. Units have slowed. We've seen about a 20% reduction on the numbers we were selling at the end of last year, but they were big numbers. We're still sort of ahead of 2 years ago, but margins are strong. But yeah, I think it's definitely going to have an impact. You can't help it. The more and more news we watch, it just seeps into the brain and the conscious or the subconscious, and before you know it, people are making tough decisions. So it's not great. I was really shocked this morning at 9%. I think we've been talking 5, then 7, and I was watching Good Morning TV as I normally do with my coffee, going, "Oh my God, that's going to be tough."
It's all part of the same, it's all the same economic triggers and levers that have left us with this situation where supply is so limited. But, in a sense, like I say, that's given you a really helpful buffer at this point, hasn't it? How positive were you coming into 2022 with that order bank? It's been really helpful, hasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I look at our forward order bank. We were talking about this at the board meeting the other day, and not the kind of detail you normally get into, but when we've got sites with 200 new vehicles on forward order, it's just unprecedented. And you asked a question, or maybe going to ask a question at the end about what does the future look like. If we can continue that forever, then I'll be a very happy man. The problem we've got at the moment around that is, although the economy is in a bit of an issue at the moment, and inflation, we do have a unique situation in our industry with this supply issue and the knock-on effect it's having with our used. So I think the used market is definitely going to, help float our business, and is definitely an area we've got to continue to focus on. Because after sales is tough. We're going through a very difficult period at the moment, which is that April, May sort of chasm, as you might call it, from 2 years. We forget. I mentioned it again at the board meeting to some of our investors and said, you do remember we were shut 2 years ago? And so that's affecting our absorption. Our costs have gone up. And the new cars, whilst we've got a great order bank, we haven't quite seen this sort of landslide of them arriving in. You speak to some of our OEMs and with the nicest possible way, they're a bit like, I don't quite know where they are. So the used piece is definitely something we've, for want of a better phrase, got to milk a little bit. So, but yeah, it's gonna be tough. It's going to be tough.
Good opportunity to segue to Umesh. Welcome back, Umesh, to the AM News Show. You're the first returnee, so it's great to have you back.
Thanks for having me back again.
No, it's always good. Used is the perennial part of the business, isn't it? That never seems to change, never seems to stop. I guess for you there is no buffer of order banks. It's constant turn. So how are you faring? We caught up at the AIM Awards last week, I hasten to say, so I think I know what's coming. You suggested things are going all right still?
To be honest with you, they are still going okay. Things are slowing down a little bit. All that can be expected. I think we've just had this almost 2 years of a boom up, really, with shortage of cars, the literature's been flying out at the prices that I don't believe we'll ever see again, ever, and probably margins as well, in all fairness. Things are slowed down a little bit, but I think that we have to remember 2 years lockdown, holidays coming up, people having natural holidays at Easter, so that's slowing a little bit down. New cars are coming through slowly, but as Ben said, there's still massive delays. So again, there's not a big rush of cars coming out, but it has certainly slowed down. But I think overall, it's just having that confidence. But just talking about inflation, that's just going to be a bit of a kick for everybody. It affects us all at whatever level we're at. But I think the media, every time the radio, the TV, whatever's on, that's constant message, isn't it, really? And I think even if people were in the market, they'll think, hold on a minute, let's just slow down a little bit. When you say 3% inflation, 4, 5, 6, all of a sudden we're up to double, aren't we? Almost, 10 nearly. So I think it's the confidence thing, really. But as long as I think we just have the confidence in ourselves and the market and not panic, I think we'll carry on.
Absolutely.
I think, like you say, without not panicking, but there are always adjustments that you can make within the business. I know from dealers that I've spoken to over the last couple of years who've adjusted their stocking profiles slightly because of the intricacies, the abnormalities of the used car market. Do you see that happening again now? Perhaps if consumers are feeling the pinch a little more, is that something that dealer groups will look at their stocking policies and think, well, actually, we need to focus a bit more on the lower price cars because they're the ones that customers are going to be wanting to get into?
For used cars, I think in all honesty, I think with most dealers have found the last couple of years, the cheaper cars have not been about. They seem to have disappeared. If you look at my stock profile, I used to carry cars from sort of 5,000 up to 45, 50,000. My average stock at the moment now is probably 20, 25,000. I haven't got the cheaper ones. There just seems to be a massive shortage of those cars. I think those people who've got those are just hanging on to them. They're not sort of traded up. They've hung on to those. Or the others have just been scrapped and what has happened to them. But I think that's a very difficult market to get cars for, generally. And I don't believe, yes, we're going through this, but I don't think people are panicking to say, right, I need to downgrade all of a sudden and let's get a cheaper car. That's my gut feeling on that.
Mm-hmm. I think from our group's point of view, one of the areas we've definitely sort of branched out into is our non-franchise, which, I don't know, historically was probably 20% of our business. Well, we've got sites in the group that are probably 40% mix now. So from a sort of franchise dealer point of view, that's had to be sort of our learning curve is sort of branching out into other makes, which, some of our sites don't have huge confidence in because it's not the norm for them. But I think it's interesting you say, as far as internally, we are definitely at a shift at the moment from our policy as far as used cars and provisions and stocking. I see whilst the market will be strong, I see a huge shift at the moment, and I hate the phrase, but we'll use it. This whole back to basics for our teams has been sort of our ethos over the last few months, because they'll hate me for saying this when they see this on this, but our teams have had it very well. very comfortable. We've got appreciating vehicles. You can make good money out of a new car. You can make good money out of a used car. If the car's a little bit into the book when you sort of purchase it, you're not going to get caught out because it's going to go up next month. So they've had it comfortable. And I'm not saying we've got lazy, but you quite quickly forget about that intricacy of detail and ensuring we do the right appraisal, make sure it stands us in right. Just some of the bits we were doing possibly before this unique period we've had. So for us, I don't think we've been caught out, but we've noticed the book was obviously starting to sort of depreciate on a number of models now, and it was a big message recently from myself to all the sales teams and heads of businesses is that let's just reset a little bit. Yeah, we're going to have to weather this storm. The market will still be good. We'll still take good margin, but you can't have both bits. We were taking full margin new, double margin to sort of historics on used cars. One of them's going to have to give a little bit. So, and I think it's the new piece that will give a little bit. We are having to make adaptations.
I think, as Ben says, I think whereas before you just take a car in, not even blink an eyelid, because it keeps going up, doesn't it? So the longer it sits on the forecourt has been, it's been increasing in value. But as I say, it's just sort of tweaking back to, hold on a minute, guys. Every car's not going to make the margin that it was doing, so just be a bit careful and just study the market a bit more rather than just go blasé and say, yeah, of course it's going to sell. Telling
the sales managers actually to go and have a look at it for the first time. For the first time you can edit that bit out because I really don't want them seeing that, but actually telling them to get out their seat and go and have a touch and feel of it, because we are going to get caught out with these vehicles coming in because choice isn't as it was. Supply is hard, and we just, as I said, got to get back to those simple basics that we've all known for years and years and years.
Do you think that COVID and this reduced cycle of stock has allowed a lot of car retailers to sort of refocus on customer service? Have staff in dealerships got more time to spend with customers and developing relationships? You're shaking your head, so I'm guessing.
We were talking about this at the board meeting the other day, and we all look after customers. I don't think there's not one retailer, franchise, non-franchise, dealer, group, whoever they are, we all look after our customers. Yes, we have the programs that monitor that. That's a slightly different piece. But I think the whole COVID piece, again, from our team's point of view, is we've been very much at distance. It's been a very different way of doing things. We've had to adapt the way we operate, and the manufacturers have adapted their programs to ask different questions. We've all suddenly changed because it literally, I think, just come to a finish, but it was a pretty rapid halt, and we were back to normality. A bit like the used car piece, we've all had to suddenly scurry around and adapt because now it's being monitored, and you're back to the sort of physical way of doing business. On the whole, I don't think we're any less busy. Our units will say that, and our throughput through our after sales departments will say that. But I think our teams, and I'm going to give them credit, so don't edit this bit out. They have a big job to do now.
There's not much editing happens in reality.
There's not much. There's quite a lot. They have to do nowadays. If you sort of wind the clock back, our guys who are sitting with a customer in sales or after sales, the process from sort of start to finish in after sales, from a D-1 to the exit, or indeed from initially taking an inquiry to. There's a lot to get around. There's a lot of touch points that we have to get right. So whilst our numbers and our our throughput maybe is slightly lower, the demands that our customers want from us, and quite rightly we should be giving, they're sort of counteracted each other, if that makes sense. So the short answer is no, we're as busy, and we're still having to do the same kind of job.
Yeah. Are you back to normal, Umesh, in your dealings with customers?
I would say so. I mean, as I've said from the word, I still believe 65-70% of the people still want to come, feel, touch, smell, drive the cars. So it's not ultimately just click and deliver. People want that. Some of them do. It suits their needs. They haven't got time to travel, make it easier. But people still want that time and dedication. So I think it's just going back to the whole process of just looking after them, which is what I keep doing, and that's what I keep shouting about, really. Raving fans is what I keep calling them. Just look after them, and they keep coming back, and they keep shouting about you. And that's what's the most important thing, isn't it, really? I think it's not losing that little focus. It's a bit of basics, really. Ring people back when you say you're going to ring them back. Things like that, really. It very much all that. I think we get sometimes sidetracked thinking there's a magic wand out there. But just step it back, spend time with the customers, answer all the questions that they want, and it's an easy job, isn't it?
Interestingly, a lot of the big PLCs have been releasing their good news stories on Q1, and amongst that is their, and these guys are, I'm going to sort of take it as pretty digitally advanced. They're not quoting huge figures on complete end-to-end digital transactions, 5-10% of their overall business. So I think, the customers haven't radically changed. They'll do a lot of work online. They may not check out online, but they'll do quite a lot of, stage 1 to however many. But like you say, it's, they still want to come in, they still want to see it. They've been locked up for a little while. They want to get out and they want to come and see us, but I don't think it's radically changed at the moment, although, the future's possibly a different story.
Yeah, I think as much as I think everybody wants to push it that way, people don't want it.
Yeah.
It's simple as that, really. So it doesn't matter, if you've got an end-to-end solution on your website and trying to force them down that route. I mean, as we already found out with one of the disruptors, all online, but then 6 months, they changed the policy because they realise all of a sudden people are not ready, or they don't want it, should we say, rather than ready. You know what I mean? They just don't want that. They still want the old-fashioned way of dealing, really.
I think we've got to be we've got to be future-proofed, and it's no different to the electric, LEV story as far as, that's been driven by European emissions, the speed, and whilst numbers are increasing considerably, which is fantastic, it's not been driven necessarily at the beginning by consumers, and it's the same with the digital piece. I think we've convinced ourselves that we must check out every customer end to end, but our consumers still want to come in and they still want to deal with us, whether it's through after sales or sales in a physical manner.
You've got that provision though, have you, at Arbury? You can do it and customers can transact.
We can't actually. We were having this conversation outside. We digitally are, I'm not going to say behind slightly. We've taken our time during lockdown not to be sort of bamboozled by the off-the-shelf, stick it in now, get it there, the customers want it. And we took our time to sort of step back and look at, it's not just a web platform, it's all the processes from people process to telephone systems to CRM systems. And we began a journey at the beginning of the year to look at the entire picture and add a fairly big overhaul. So our actual new web platform will not go live till August. And so we'll probably be one of the last to the party. You can't currently on our website do that. And it is hindering us as a business now when we look at the stats compared to what we could get or what's out there in the industry. But I'm confident by just sort of biding our time, there's a bigger picture. And talking to Vicky outside, you can't just build a website and go, we're transformed digitally. It doesn't operate like that. You've actually got to go, well, what happens when they phone in? Can they get hold of someone? And when they actually visit us, is that person there? And can we trace the lead from origin all the way to a sale? And because otherwise, you just got a really great experience online, and everything else isn't. I'm not saying our teams aren't, but everything else isn't up to that level. So
I think
we're getting there. Is the answer.
Yeah, I think going back to saying end-to-end solution. I've had that on my website probably 4 years. I've not done a single one all the way through. I've had online reservations, and it was a big help 2 years ago in lockdown. In March we went to lockdown, and literally a couple of weeks later, people actually wanted to reserve online, or they were ringing up saying, "Look, I've seen your car, I want it. What do I do?" Either go online, or there's my bank details, just transfer, small deposit, the car's on hold for you. So I don't think you particularly missed out.
Is it something that independents have invested in, Umesh? I mean, I can't imagine many have, seeing that the focus is often, a local relationship, a local presence, and a real hands-on, personal service. I'm guessing it's not really appealed when people are looking around thinking, what should I spend my money on at the moment?
Don't forget, it's not just local business, is it? Independents still do
True.
National business, although a lot of my business is local, I still do national business, I've got a guy coming from Somerset tomorrow to buy a car, so it's all over the place. But I think it's just giving the customer the option. If they fancy that at 2:00 in the morning, I think I really fall in love with that car. I don't want to miss it. I hit the button and reserve it. So it's just giving the option. I've said this all the way along with anybody. We don't want to force customers down a certain journey. But if they're comfortable just reserving it, and having a conversation next day, that's what it's about, isn't it? Really, it's simple as that. Really, it's not just.
I think it's about having the facility. We survived lockdown through some incredibly good people. So for a while now, our people within the business have bridged that digital gap and done very, very well. So I don't see it as a replacement for a person, an individual, someone who is knowledgeable about the product or knowledgeable about after sales. I see it as an assistant. It's a system. At the end of the day, it is a system. It's not going to fix X, Y, Z. You've still got to have the right people, in the right positions, doing the right job. But I think, yes, we may be a little bit late as far as Arbury are concerned, but I think it will only enhance, and it's an exciting time.
I guess ultimately the customer needs to feel comfortable and a sense of trust, no matter how they're going through the process, whether that's online, whether that's offline, or a blend of the two. And I don't know about you, but I maybe it's me showing my middle age now, but I kind of I get a bit frustrated with spending hours researching stuff online, and actually the opportunity to speak to an expert, to whether face-to-face or over the phone or whatever, and actually get the job done in probably half the time that I'd have to spend if I was researching everything to the nth degree online, just knowing that I can trust that I've got a fair deal is worth the time that I could save by having that conversation. And there is no one customer out there who wants to do it in one way. There's a whole raft of customers, and there will be a few who want to do it all online. There will always be ones who want to do everything offline. There's a whole kind of swathe in between that, I guess. The challenge is, as motor retailers, you've got to be able to cater for the breadth of those.
I think from our point of view, it's a really good point, because particularly with new car supply at the moment, loyalty to brand is actually is on the decline, if I'm brutally honest, because you don't have much choice. So they're probably going to have a list of sort of 4 or 5 cars, and it's which one can I get? We've got to be really careful around the brands we have with that, because they could be in that for a PCP for 2-3 years, and we may have lost them through the circumstances beyond our control a little bit. So it has been definitely a push on the individual, the information, how good are they, what do you have as far as in your armoury, as far as knowledge is concerned. So it has been a big push for us to ensure that our teams, create that trust. You create that trust in the brand and in Arbury itself. Because otherwise we are going to, unfortunately, as I said, due to the situation, we're going to lose some of that brand loyalty. So, yeah. Funny
you mentioned that about branding, because 2 examples very recent with my customers. One, I got a Cooper on order, and he's waited, and I bought one of the other cars off him a couple of weeks ago, and when they pulled up, I thought, what's that outside? And I said, where's your Cooper? It's still been delayed, so they bought Hyundai. And it literally was, they walked in, there's a cancelled order sitting there, we'll have that. So there's 2 or 3 of my customers done that in the last couple of months. Literally, they've had cars in order forever, decided they've had enough now. So the brands for the new cars, like I said, they're just chopping in whatever's available rather than we need to have.
Which is even more important, my point, when you get a customer coming to us who's not one of our brands, and you're like, well, you've got to be on your A game.
Yeah.
A plus game now, because this guy or lady, they're not used to Peugeot or Nissan or the brands we have. You've got to give them the best possible service you can, because you have an opportunity to put this customer into a brand with us, and indeed Arbury as a brand for, well, if we do the job right, potentially forever.
Yeah. But by the same token, you guys have got, you've got decent footprint now and a lot of brands to offer. So is there an effort to really keep people in the Arbury brand rather than with a Peugeot or a Nissan or Seat?
Well, I mean, one of the areas we've definitely made a decision last year, or I did with the directors, to move to is multi-franchising a lot of our sites. I know we talked about acquisitions outside. I think, from a business of our side, acquisition's probably not something on our cards for the next 18 months, but definitely where we have single operator sites, and we have some bits which I can't go into but are coming, we're going to multi-franchise through some of our partners. When we have those sites already, we do have multi-franchise sites. Yes, there is more, for want of a better phrase, cross-pollination. If they're not happy with a 3008, we have a Nissan business next door, let's go and have a look at a Qashqai. If we've got a E208 and it's too small, can we go and have a look at a Leaf next door? So it's definitely something we've got to make sure we, for want of a better phrase again, milk the opportunity to suit the business, rather than traditional salesmen might go, okay, you don't want it, and not have a conscious sort of company group head on, which is very difficult when you get down to even sales managers, sales execs, because they're focused in on Peugeot or Nissan. So it is about the way we think long term of these customers for the benefit of the group.
How do your franchisees take it with that, though?
Well, hopefully they don't watch this.
It's like put you on the spot there, Ben. That can be challenging, I can imagine.
I think it is challenging.
Yeah.
All of our partners currently have stock. They do have stock. It is a bit of a myth that there's nothing out there. There is stock. It's about getting a little bit away from this wholesale culture of you just take whatever you want, build it however you want, light it up like a Christmas tree if that's what you want to do. It'll be so far, or you can have this colour, and you can have all of that. To actually now, we used to be a bit like that with a lot of our brands. This is the car we have. It may be not quite the right colour, and it might have a panoramic roof. But we'll do a deal, and we'll get you into the car, and you can have it within the next 4 weeks. So I think our brands, possibly our partners would be not particularly happy by that comment, but I think ultimately at the end of the day, it's horses for courses. There's going to be winners. You're going to win and you lose, and hopefully it'll smooth out in the long run.
Yes,
I hope.
Yeah. No, as you say, somebody could do for Peugeot, still have a Nissan this time. Next time, this might be still a Peugeot. Yeah. So it'll even itself out.
It's definitely happening more. Yes. If you'd have asked me this 2 years ago, we have the odd one, but you only know from the noise from your general managers, or actually it comes from the sales managers, because obviously the general managers look after the site as a whole, and they're like, oh, they went next door, and But I think we're starting to get to a bit more of a culture of, it's a customer, it's an Arbury customer.
You're
without sounding arrogant. Retain the business, because it's a longer piece than a car, because there's after sales and there's everything that goes with it. So.
You talked a little bit there about moving people into different cars that are available, and perhaps it's a car without a panoramic sunroof or an electric tailgate or whatever. But I wondered, at the moment we're hearing a lot about manufacturers constantly evolving the specification of the cars and the things that are included to try and get them out there, to try and get a flow into dealerships. I'm not going to probe you about your manufacturer partners and who's doing what, but I just wonder, particularly since we've got Umesh here, what the effect of that's going to be 1, 2, 3 years down the line. Is this going to really mess with the used market and residuals, do we think, going forwards, or is the manufacturer strategies to ensure that that's not an issue?
I wouldn't mention anyone in particular, but I'm not sure they've thought that far down the road, because we are aware of cars coming through with cap IDs that don't actually match the specification of the vehicle. So that is going to be a problem. We do have manufacturers that are sending cars through now that are on order for a customer, and they're actually changing the specification before it lands, and that can be a problem. If you think about a Motability customer that's ordered a automatic tailgate because they've got a wheelchair, for example, and it's now not. This is a genuine scenario. It's now coming through without one. That's a huge issue from a customer experience point of view, but it's also a knock-on experience issue. From cap ID and future values and what that looks like. So it's not hugely prolific, but it's more prolific than it was 6 months ago, and it's only increasing. So we again talked about this at the board meeting. There is some concerns here and now about that because we have to manage these customers, and it's complicated. And they're the partners, our manufacturer partners, are helping us. I will say that on record. That we're doing our best. There's to manage that experience and the customer, etc. But it's complicated. It's just another. I'm not going to say nail in the coffin, but it's another nail in the coffin for a customer that's waited a long time for it. There's been constant delays, and then there's an issue with it. But you're right. I'm not quite sure what happens 2 years down the road when some of these options are £1,500 and they don't exist. This car's it's going to be a problem.
What are you and other independents that you talk to must be. I mean, this is already an issue, isn't it? Trying to find the correct spec on a car. You don't always get that information now. So
absolutely, 100%. Ben, as you just said, the problem is it's ongoing all the time. It'll be compounded even more with the current situation. But this is a constant thing. This is why I say to people who are selling cars to me, don't just put the reg number in, the mileage to get a valuation. You need to be having a conversation with these sellers and buyers, whatever. Look, this is the spec it should have. What's additional anyway on top of that? But there's too many people going to get caught out. Just valuing cars willy-nilly was simply putting the registration mileage in. A lot of dealers will be, because some of them are not trained to understand the specification. They're just too easy going on data. And it's all about data. Yes, we know data is vital to any business, but sometimes you have to go, back to basics again. Understand what the car spec should be.
Which is sort of back to my point a little bit, tongue-in-cheek about how guys getting out their chairs. Yeah. You need to be super careful, with some of these cars, and it's going to be a bit down the road, but go and have a look at it. Because, as I said, some of them are, upwards. They've got multiple options. We could be talking 3 or 4, options that don't appear on that. Some of them are, the digital touch displays on some of our cars, and they've gone back to, I suppose you call it analog. And, that's quite a big feature on a car that, so I think, like you say, I will say it one last time, but back to the basics. Yeah. Let's go and see the car, let's touch it, feel it, understand it, and that's going to become even more prevalent, down the road.
It's difficult in sort of a data-driven era, increasingly data-driven, isn't it? Especially if you're buying bulk in some cases.
But I did hear of, again, a few months back, some Volvo products. I can't think of the exact model, but let's say XC60, whatever it was, the Pro model, whatever, should have certain specification. There's quite a few built without. And again, if you don't know what should be standard, you value the car on what it should be. All of a sudden, the car comes in, it hasn't got the pan roof, hasn't got the 7 seats, or whatever it may be. You're well out of bed on the price, aren't you? Desirability, sale price, the price you've paid. All of a sudden, you've got a lemon sitting on the forecourt. A very expensive lemon.
If your systems then feed that through direct into your consumer marketing, then you're potentially marketing the car as having X systems when because it's been in a certain range of build slots, then it hasn't got.
Absolutely. This is what I will say to a lot of customers. I mean, maybe I'm a bit too fussy sometimes, but all my cars that I have, I individually write the full script down of what the options are. I delete the self-populated thing, so at least I know what it's got on there, because there's too many, again, currently, where it'll say it's got, let's say, sat nav, for example, it hasn't got it on. And consumers only read what they want to read, which is right, the data's there, but half the time it's wrong, And I've been asked, I've seen one similar. It said it's got this, and that. I said, no, it's just because it's been self-populated. I've actually written the description myself. I know what that car is. There's not another one like it because my description is accurate.
And I'll echo that. We're a smaller business. I keep saying that, and I'll get told off for it. But we're a smaller business that, we've taken the time to ensure that our managers own, the advert, whether it's through Auto Trader or whatever portal it is, that we delete the generic, and every car is written bespoke for 2 reasons really. To give trust to our customers that actually we know what the car we're talking about, but actually, again, coming back to my piece, to make our teams actually go out and own their own stock, understand it. But on the data piece, it's interesting you say that. We've become, especially with lockdown, very insight data-driven. I think our industry's moved at a huge pace over the last few years, and the likes of Auto Trader, we were talking outside, have driven that, insight. We've got to be really careful it's still just data. And, you know, we did a trial with Auto Trader last year where we went from their smaller package to their retail accelerator, and we turned it off after a week because it was so regimented data. You couldn't touch the system and you couldn't adjust pricing, and that we turned it off because, you know, we'd like to have a bit of entrepreneurship with our managers, that they own their business as an individual and their stock. So I think we've got to be really careful with data, that it has a piece, a bit like, you know, we're talking about the data coming back from these used cars, but it'll never be a substitute for us, you know, a human being to go out there and you know.
What are you hoping to emerge from this year feeling or having achieved? You know, what's the best case after starting on such a low note with the inflation figures as we did?
We started to forecast the half year, actually, interestingly, and then you start to think, what could H2 look like? And I think we've got to put it all into context. We as an industry had an incredibly good year. I don't think there's anyone I've spoken to about 2021 and they haven't said, oh no, it wasn't very good. We're going to have a good year. And I think a lot of dealer groups are already reporting, the Virtue were on record results, but I think it was caveated with, if you read the piece, it could be difficult. You know, what does the future look like? I think by the time we get to December, looking at where we are in our order bank, and, you know, whilst after sales is tough at the moment, very tough, I do think it's going to come back, and I can see that through the bookings we're making through our systems and our contact centre. I actually think we're going to have a very good year if you go back and compare it to the sort of norm of the 15 years before. But of course, we're a year-on-year comparison. That's what we do. So compared to last year, no, it won't be there. So I'm not negative. I think it's going to be a positive piece from a used car point of view. I think eventually we'll see the new cars, these forward orders. I'm really hoping that they'll be this year because, you know, again, I keep forecasting and looking at margins and we could have a real bumper time with that. We've got a huge digital, I hate this phrase, but we've got a huge digital transformation piece on. So I think we've got more projects on this year. My predecessor will hate me for saying this, than there was ever done in 20 years. So I think it'll be a really good year internally from that point of view. I do think the result will be good. And then we move on to another.
Oh.
And hopefully,
Who knows?
So I'm already racing out. and I think, you know, supply will come back. But I think I'm hoping, you know, we talked about what's as the future, and that was going to be one of the questions. I am hoping that our partners, I don't want to use the word learn because that's really condescending, but I hope that we just don't go back to this whole push new car piece of wholesale, and there's a middle ground to be had. And, you know, yes, agency, we could talk for hours about it and how it looks, and maybe that's the birth of it. But there's somewhere in the middle that we can really operate in a efficient, effective way, making good margins, and as you said earlier, look after the customer with the right kind of amount of time.
Thanks ever so much, guys.
Thanks,
Ben. Thanks, Umesh.
Thank you.
Great for you to join us.